Thank you all for attending today. Just a couple of things. I just wanted to let you know that you can put all questions that you have during the chat, and Shelley is going to answer those questions throughout her presentation to create more of an organic discussion. And so I'm really excited about that and being able to follow it. Also, take very good notes if you're able to. We're going to be able to send a link of today's presentation. We won't be sending any type of resource or material, but we will send a link. And so if you're able to take notes, I think that would be very beneficial because, like I said, I'm really excited about today's topic. I just wanted to be able to give a presentation of our speaker today, Shelley, who's also one of our instructors. So Shelley spent most of her early career working in the oil and gas industry until a new opportunity arose with BP that proved to be the turning point in her professional life. Tasked with designing and delivering programs focused on creating a culture of open discussion and transparency, proved to be the experience that fueled her passion to teach and inspire individuals to lead with passion and purpose. Shortly after leaving BP, Shelley started her own coaching and training firm. It's called True North Coaching and Development, where she conducts leadership development training for organizations. And so we welcome you today, Shelley, and we're excited to hear from you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Atisha. I really appreciate that. And I already saw a question in the chat about whether or not there was captioning available, just FYI. So hopefully there is, and we can help folks out with that. So super excited to be here with all of y'all today, particularly talking about a topic that comes up a lot with the folks that I coach in the capacity of either career coaching or leadership coaching. And it falls under this banner of how can we have more effective conversations with each other? How can I talk with straight talk or say what needs to be said? But without ruining the relationship. And so I want to spend a little bit of time delving into this and share, some of my experience with this and share a few tools that hopefully y'all will be able to take away and apply. And so with that said, I want to start off with a definition of straight talk, or how I'm looking at it or defining it in the context of this webinar. So there's really three aspects to this definition. So the first is about caring personally about our relationships and people. So there's the caring personally aspect, as well as sharing our perspective, which is the second part. And the third aspect of this is inviting others to do the same. So what this might potentially look like, I hear your point of view is X, I have a different one, I see or believe that Y might be the case. And, and interestingly, when we think about this, when we think about what is straight talk and what are the components of it, it's all in service of living values, as part of our daily practice and how we show up, like living values of honesty, because honesty is really important, living the value of respect, and living the value of integrity. That all naturally contributes to this, and that's why this is so important. But I want to highlight this last bit right here that's on the slide. And in fact, let me get my handy dandy pen and see if I can actually use this. Okay. But remember that honesty without compassion can be brutality. And so there's distinctions here. On the slide I've got as an example, I think your idea is stupid. And there was a famous CEO that was actually known for saying that phrase all the time. And that was Steve Jobs. And I think ultimately, while he may have gotten away with that because he was a CEO, you can argue that maybe that's not exactly what we're aiming for. And so, as we talk about like, what is this and what does it look like? Hopefully those distinctions will become a bit more clear. But that's not necessarily what we're aiming at, is the Steve Jobs approach to this. So I think we can do a little bit better than that. So I I want to start a conversation around this in terms of mindset, and particularly what holds us back. Why don't we do this, or why don't we do it well? And as we think about this, there may be a number of things that come up. And I'm curious, and I think there's a poll question that relates to this. So if there's any way to pull that up, that would be fantastic. Okay, there it is. All right, that's the first thing that is going right with the technology, which is awesome. Okay, so why don't we do it, or why don't we do it well? I think you can only pick one, but you could try to pick more than one and see if it lets you. But what comes up most for you in terms of why don't we do it, or why don't we do it well? Is it means being unkind? Is it I can't upset people? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Like I heard that a lot in the South growing up, particularly from authority figures, like, you've got to be nice, can't hurt people's feelings. I must tell the truth at all costs. Tough love hurts. Silence is golden. I can't challenge someone senior to me. So go ahead, we can open the poll. I don't know if it needs to be opened, and vote for the things that kind of get in the way, for you personally, in terms of your mindset, maybe what keeps you either from doing it or from doing it well.
Shelley, are you able to see the poll now?
I'm totally able to see the poll. And I don't know if it's open where people can vote.
I think they're voting now.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes.
Okay.
And it looks like Rebecca let us know that you can select more than one. So
Oh, awesome.
select as many as apply.
Okay, yeah. So any of these that come up for you, or maybe you've thought them and it's kind of held you back from having the conversation, or maybe like, you thought, oh, well, just, tough love hurts and I'm just going to say it, and maybe it didn't go so well. So I'm curious. I can't see the poll. Let's see, no poll here either. I wonder, do I need to move it
Are you
over?
ready for the results, Shelley?
I am. And if you can't, hold on one sec. If you can't see it, it might have been because it popped up like in a different screen or behind something. Just FYI. And it looks like you're sharing the results now. And it looks like, let's see, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It is kind of the it looks like that's the key aspect that people are honing in on. And let's see, I can't challenge someone senior to me, also got a lot of votes. And I can't upset people, also got a lot of votes. And it means being unkind, also got a lot of votes. Interesting. Yeah. All right. So it looks like quite a few of you were able to vote. And so that's interesting. And there'll be a few more polls, by the way. So if you need to move some things around on your desktop in order to see when they pop up, feel free. And I'm not surprised actually to see those responses, because there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way of us being able to do this well. And I want to talk about kind of what this can potentially look like, or how we kind of fall into these tendencies where maybe we're doing straight talk, but we're not doing it that well, or we're not doing it at all, or maybe we're hitting the mark. Because I think it's important to delve into this and kind of see what our tendencies are. So there's really two aspects to this. Like I mentioned before, there's the caring personally. And if I put that up the vertical axis, I have on this particular slide. And then there's the challenge directly, which is going along the horizontal. And there's one of four spots we can often end up in, depending on our skill at doing this and depending on our willingness to do it. So we might find ourselves in that ruinous empathy box. And I see that a lot. And I refer to this one as, it's kind of the box where I care a lot personally, but I'm not challenging directly. And so what you might see in situations where ruinous empathy is kind of the name of the game, in a department or a group, you might see a lot of people walking on eggshells, or maybe sugarcoating, just about everything that they're saying, because they don't want to hurt each other's feelings. And so that's one place people might go to. So it's important to think, is that my default? And I'll ask a question around this in just a second. Contrast that with what's directly below that. And that's what we're calling manipulative insincerity. So in that case, I'm not challenging directly, and I don't really care about the people involved. And so what that can potentially look like in a group is a lot of passive aggressive behavior, a lot of politics. You often see a lot of gossip, happening in these situations, or kind of manipulative backstabbing, where I don't care and I'm not going to challenge. I'm just going to go around the person, or I'm going to find other more passive aggressive ways of getting my frustration out. And that can often happen in organizations. And then there's the compassionate candor quadrant, which is where we want to be aiming for. And that's where we're going to be honing in terms of the conversations that we're going to be having today. That's all about caring personally and challenging directly. And I'm able to maintain a balance between those two. And I often refer to living in this quadrant as being able to speak the truth, but with love. And that's really what we're aiming for. And then finally, directly underneath that, there's this quadrant that I'm calling obnoxious aggression. And so the interesting thing about that one, the phrase that I often use is leaving a trail of dead bodies. So I'm probably challenging really directly, but I don't care all that much about the person. And so I'm not thinking about how to also integrate that message with compassion. And maybe I'm getting things done, but there's a real cost to that. So the question that I have for all of you. So here's another poll question. And Atisha, if you wouldn't mind bringing this one up. But where do you tend to default to? Is it the quadrant of ruinous sympathy? Is it the quadrant of manipulative insincerity? Is it the quadrant of obnoxious aggression or compassionate candor? And so something should have hopefully popped up, which you can now see.
And then Shelley, just let me know when you want me to close the poll so the results will appear.
Okay. And just let me know, Atisha, when people stop. It looks like people stop answering, because you can probably see that more so than me.
I can. It looks like we have about 70% of participants who have voted.
Okay.
Looks like
Great.
it's slowed down.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. And okay. So last but not least, here's your last chance if you want to put your vote in. Which quadrant do you default to? Okay, Atisha, you can close the poll now and show the results. Okay. Ruinous sympathy. Ruinous sympathy is high, and compassionate candor. Okay. All right. Love it. Love it. And so let's see. And then we've got some that maybe fall more into the manipulative insincerity box, and some the obnoxious aggression. Interesting. Yeah. And so yeah, and I'm seeing some of the comments in chat too. I'm appreciating the descriptors on these quadrants, and I can really see how these may happen. Yeah, and absolutely, Miranda. I have had different responses depending on the work environment, confidence, and trust. Absolutely. Yeah, so we may show up a little bit differently depending on, the context of the situation or the people involved. That is absolutely sometimes the case. Having said that, we do have kind of a default place where we tend to go to. And what's interesting about that, and let me just check in, Tisha, is it not possible to take some people off mute and just hear a little bit of their experiences with this?
I believe I can. If you would like to, let's see.
I'd like to unmute folks because I'd like to have more of a conversation.
Sure, absolutely. If you could just tell me.
Have them click the raise hand button
And
and
then
then
you
you can unmute.
Yeah.
one by one.
Brilliant.
Okay, perfect. We have Caesar who I can allow to talk.
Okay, yeah, great. Because what I'd love to hear is like, I'd love to hear from a few of you, where have you seen this show up with your teams and how has this impacted the quality of interactions? And so, okay, it looks like Cesar, you've got your hand up, or Caesar, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Oh, I'm Cesar. Thanks for letting me speak. I really like this question because I think that, yeah, at times we've had these experiences in each, and I like to think that with the proper training, which I felt like I got at some point in little places of my life, and also experience in each of these quadrants, that I tended more towards the upper right quadrant because, like, you kind of learn from those
Right.
experiences and what's going to happen if you play that game. And I think that you end up seeing a lot of these things. Like it feels like you're trying to walk on eggshells, or it feels like you're a part of like this what's it called? Like this rebel formation or whatever, like this rebellious group inside of the organization, or where you see the result of this sort of breaking through brick walls just leaves people like distant from you because they don't like that type of interaction. So I think that between the experiences and also some guidance, that like we would want to try and guide towards the upper right.
Awesome. Awesome, Caesar. And I love your point that like you've learned from over time, trying this out and maybe getting some feedback. Because my personal philosophy on any of this personal development or leadership development work is practice makes better. It doesn't make perfect. And so we're constantly striving and trying things and seeing what works and seeing what isn't work. And Carol, I see your hand up.
I love this. This is my favorite thing because I'm in communications. I've been working in communications for my entire adult life. And I can tell you, and I'm almost at retirement age, and there's no answer to any of this, right? No, because we joke, our motto at our agency is it depends. And the reason I say that is that I think we all tend to walk on eggshells and sugarcoat when we're speaking to someone in an authority who could like hurt your career or hurt you. Right. And we tend to, when other people around us tend to be manipulative, we all can wait. Sometimes we fall into that because we're trying to fit in, right?
Right.
And obnoxious aggression is only reserved for those people who actually need it. I don't know, why do I have to be obnoxious to anybody unless they're what? Obnoxious first. But my favorite really is working and striving to use my compassion to speak the truth with love. That's my favorite phrase that I've seen in a long time. I think it's wonderful, and I thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. I mean, this came out of a lot of the work that I did with BP after Deepwater. We have candid conversations where we're being more transparent and being direct about like what some of the issues are, but saying that with a compassionate slant to it. So, and I'm seeing a lot of the comments that are coming in chat as well, and there's all sorts of like amazing comments that are coming in, and I can't like filter through all of them quickly enough. Because I can't multitask, but I saw as well though, there were a few comments that were made about like I go from ruinous empathy to obnoxious aggression, and I think it was Ella that said that in the chat, and I think that's really, really interesting because I do that too, and I think a lot of us do, because there's where we tend to default. And obviously it's contextual, it depends a lot on the other person. It depends a lot on the situation, maybe if they're more senior, but then Then there's where we go under stress. And I just know from my own personal experience, like I flirt that boundary between compassionate candor and maybe ruinous empathy from time to time. But under stress, I often go straight to obnoxious aggression because I'm under time pressure then. And so we've got a third poll question, and I want to bring that up as well, because I feel like this is an interesting angle to explore too, is where do you default to under stress? And is it different? You know, I might be interested to hear from a few people to raise their hands that it's different. Like, where do you go to under stress? Do you, like myself, find yourself falling into the quadrant of obnoxious aggression, or do you go somewhere else? And Atisha, just let me know when the voting starts slowing down.
All right, it looks like we have 50% participants. And then it looks like we also have a question whenever you're ready in the chat about how to muster the courage to straight talk without offending.
Yeah, and Chaz, that's a great question, and I'm going to get into that. So that's kind of a great segue to the next few slides. and we will definitely hit that. But I will come back to that towards the end. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and close the poll now, and everybody can see. So where do we go under stress? Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So it shifts a bit. So, you know, particularly when we're under stress, like we're not utilizing compassionate candor as much. We're going more for obnoxious aggression, and then it's kind of split between ruinous empathy and manipulative insincerity. Because some of us might be more overtly aggressive, some of us might be more passive aggressive. And there's no right or wrong, right? I'm asking these questions more to get you to think about your tendencies, how stress impacts some of this, so that we can become more aware. Because one of the things I'm really big on is the whole mindful aspect of leadership development and personal development. And it's only when we become more aware of things that actually we can work on them or fix them. Ooh, and let's see, Jet's hand is up. And I think I recognize Jet from, maybe she's been on a class at CPE. But Jet, if you've got a question, go ahead.
I think they might have lowered their hand. I can't find them anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh, no.
There we are.
Yeah, Jet, go for it.
Yes, I've been in a couple of your classes, so I'm excited to be here today. Cool. I was just going to say that I think my default is ruinous empathy. And then kind of weirdly, when I'm stressed, I do want to go towards obnoxious aggression, yes. But at the same time, I feel like, you know, under time crunches, I almost spend more time thinking about how I can get what I need out of people. And so I do sometimes end up with compassionate candor because I'm being more intentional.
Right. That's great awareness. And I see Kenneth's hand up too. I'll go ahead and take Kenneth, you've got a question, or if you want to make a comment, and you've got the
yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
A couple of things. I think that was a very interesting question. Under stress, I think it's, with me, very situational, because in the industry I work in, it's a tech industry, especially with newer employees, I really tend to be kind of walking on the eggshells, because in this industry, people just leave when they just don't like how something's working. So it's a very selfish motive that I have to handle things that way. With someone in the middle of a project, or with someone who's been there for a while, then I'm not as let's say, much walking on eggshells. So there's a very practical reason that I do change the behavior.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense, you know. And again, it you know, there's no, there's no optimal set of answers I was expecting. It's more, I find from a coaching perspective, just really interesting to ask the questions and get people to think about, where do I go? Where do I sit? What might need to change? I'm also seeing y'all are still burning up the chat, which is awesome. All right. So here's what I want to spend a little bit of time delving into now. So I'll get into the questions in just a second. So resist the temptation to read everything on the slide and let that derail you from what I'm saying. Because I want to speak to these three elements of straight talk. And I also want to model what this would potentially look like. And I'm going to use an example of a situation that I encountered the other day with a colleague, actually. So we were on the same level, peer to peer, and we were both working together to facilitate a program, actually for a client. This was a leadership program. And so what I find is really helpful, because I mentioned there's three elements to this, that I've got to bring out all three of these things in the conversation. So it's not enough just to care personally. The question to then ask yourself is, okay, this is the first element of doing this well. How am I going to demonstrate in the conversation that I'm really caring about this person or this situation? And how am I going to lead with that? Because often I find that when we lead from that place of compassion as a way of opening up the discussion, it puts us off or puts us on a better footing, so to speak. Then I might get into the detail of what I need to say. And it's important to share your perspective and to share it clearly, where you're being clear about what the issue is. So quite often I notice because I've done a lot of work on helping people have courageous conversations, and I've kind of watched people like demo conversations or practice conversations. And it's interesting because halfway through the conversation, I'll stop it and I'll ask the person who is initiating the conversation, okay, what do you think the issue is? And they'll tell me one thing. And then I'll ask the person who's on the receiving end of it, what did you think the point of this conversation was? And they'll tell me something completely different. And so being really clear about what you perceive the issue to be is super important. And when we're nervous about that, we often do something that I call burying the lead, where we try to soften it so much that it actually takes away the clarity. So it's important to share that perspective and to be clear about what you perceive the issue to be. And then lastly, it's about inviting others to do the same. So this isn't a one-way conversation. Like if I was going to give Atisha, some feedback on something, I would then open up the conversation for her to be able to share her perspective as well after I've shared, what I wanted to share. So again, the three elements. So going back to what this could potentially look like, I'll model a conversation I had the other day with my colleague, Charles. And so one of the things I noticed that he was doing that was really getting in the way of his ability to be effective, and it was impacting the quality of the sessions we were running, is that he was reading from the slides. And as far as I'm concerned, as a facilitator, that's a big no-no. We're professionals, we know the content, I'm able to, I could do this in my sleep. Like it's being able to articulate things in such a way, in an engaging way, where I'm not reading from the slides, and that as a participant brings you in more. Okay, so I needed to give him this feedback, and I needed to share this because this wasn't just his performance; it's also my performance. We're co-delivering this together. And so I said to Charles, hey, Charles, I know that like you're so interested in the participant experience. I know that you want them to get the best out of everything that we're presenting. I know that you care about them so deeply. And I've noticed one thing that's really getting in the way of your ability to be successful. And that thing is that I notice you reading from the slides. And the concern I've got about that is that it's not engaging. And I've noticed, you know, some people switching off as a result of that. What do you think? You know, what's your perspective on this and how you've been showing up? So I'll stop modeling there, but that's pretty much a verbatim model of what I shared with my colleague the other day. And so when you think about it, and I was trying to illustrate with my fingers kind of where I was in each part of that, this doesn't have to necessarily be a lengthy conversation, but I started with the compassionate aspect. And I think it's really, again, I think it's really important to start there, one. And I think two, it's important to kind of check your intent as well before you walk into a straight talk conversation. And the reason I say that is if you check your intent and ask myself, what's my intention in this conversation? Is my intention to do the right thing for this other person and help them? Or is it my intention to be right? And that can often help, you know, like kind of giving yourself a sense check, because sometimes we're not in the right frame of mind to have these conversations as well. And it's worth kind of spending a little bit of time, you know, going away and planning it more carefully, to Jet's point that she was making. So I really want to hone in on the intention aspect of this too, because I think it's an important part of teeing yourself up for success with these conversations, and making sure that they go well. And so now what I want to do is I want to get y'all thinking about this a little bit relative to yourself. And so for about 5 minutes, we're going to do some journaling. And I want you to spend some time thinking about these 3 questions here that are on the slide. And then I'll be curious to hear some of your responses. But when you think about these 3 elements, you know, the caring personally, the sharing your perspective and or challenging directly, and then inviting others into the conversation. First question, what are your learning edges? Or in other words, what do you need to improve on the most? Maybe you're really good at the caring personally part, but then you bury the lead and you're not clear about what the issue is. Or maybe you have a tendency to do what I call kind of dump and run, whereas you kind of dump something on another person, but you don't invite the conversation up. Like you don't invite them into the conversation to share their point of view. So go ahead and spend, I'm going to put about 5 minutes on the clock. And I want you to journal, what are my learning edges, or what do I need to improve on the most? Which of these 3 am I great at? And how do I know? And what do I need to work on? And how will I do that? So maybe it's, you know, spending a little bit more time preparing for these conversations and trying it out on somebody, you know, before you actually deliver the message. Maybe you got a trusted buddy or somebody you can bounce things off. Maybe you've got a mentor in this space. Or if you don't have a mentor, maybe it's worth finding one. So I want you to just do a little bit of journaling on that for the next few minutes. And I'll let you know when we're halfway through. And I put 5 minutes on the clock. And then I'm happy to hear from a few of you in terms of what you think. What do you need to work on? What might you do about it? I'll open up the floor at that point. Yeah, so what I mean by edges, where do I need to improve? It's another way of saying how much you need to improve. What are your learning edges? Which one do you need to sharpen up on the most? Is it the caring personally and demonstrating that in the conversation? Is it the sharing your perspective and or challenging directly, or is it inviting others to do the same? And once you finish answering some of these, feel free to put your responses in chat. We've got a couple more minutes on the clock. Great. And I see some folks starting to put some of their learning challenges or maybe where they need to improve into chat. Yeah. I'm strong in inviting others to share, but I'm weakest at challenging directly. Yeah, I'll invite other perspectives and not share my own. Yeah, and your perspective is just as important, right? But sometimes we forget that. Brilliant. And anybody wanna share on microphone? You know, maybe some of the things they've struggled with. Yeah. Let's see. I see Caesar's hand again. Okay, Caesar, go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, in principle, I definitely agree with the first two. I feel a lot better about the third one. But like, I think what happens is sometimes the response that I receive is so startling that
Yeah.
I kind of lose track of my own ground in what the truth of the matter is and how I can help about that. And then I have to sort of like regroup in my mind or whatever. So my learning edge is definitely the compassion because of getting startled, and I think that to work on that, I just again need to be work on my response and my susceptibility to being startled and remaining grounded in the moment or whatever it is. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and to your point, Caesar, and I appreciate you sharing that, like, and the honesty with the challenges that you're struggling with. I think because I get startled too, and easier said than done. But if I can stay in that place of genuine curiosity, where it's like, huh, that's really interesting. I wonder why they said that. And then start asking this is when I put on my coach hat and go into kind of coach mode, because often what happens is like somebody says something we're not expecting, and then we just keep advocating our point of view more and more and more. So then what you sometimes end up with is it's almost like I'm pushing, they're pushing, and you end up with that. And so when we can get curious and start asking lots of like open-ended questions, like I'm curious, like what made you feel that way? Or I'm curious, like, so you thought you were supposed to be reading the slides. That's interesting. I'm wondering, like, who did you talk to that told you that was the case, or where did that point of view come from? Help me understand. And so, when we can actually put on that hat of curiosity and really start to delve in, I think that can be really helpful. There's one other thing I want to share on that front, because I like to geek out with acronyms and tools. And so there's something else that I remember. And it doesn't stand for professional certified coach, which actually, like, I am, but but it actually means something different. When I'm in a conversation with somebody, and when things are starting to get pretty derailed, or maybe I'm going one direction and they're going the other, it's typically because I don't have clarity on one of three things. One, I don't really understand what their purpose is or what's really important to them. And so sometimes asking that question, even like, what's really important to you? Like, I feel like we're not connecting in this. Like, what is it really important to you that I understand in this conversation or about your situation? The first C stands for concerns, and then circumstances. So what questions can I ask that would give me a better understanding of like where this person's concerns are coming from? Or what questions can I ask that would give me a better understanding of the circumstance that they're in that might be causing them to show up a certain way? And so, it's almost like being a detective and kind of putting on that inquiry hat. So hopefully that's helpful. And let's see, I see Christina's hand is up too. I will take Christina's comments, and then I want to share another tool, which I think might be really helpful as well. So Christina,
Hello.
go for it.
Yes, so I was just reflecting that I'm pretty straightforward in sharing my perspective and asserting authoritatively what needs to happen and like goal minded and things like that. But what ends up happening sometimes that I've run into is then it becomes like what you were talking about, it becomes a power struggle of, even if I invite others to share their perspective, at the end of the day, if I'm the final manager to make the call,
Mhm.
how do you then say, I understand your perspective or your concern or your thoughts. However, this is the way in which we are going to handle this particular situation. Because at the end of the day, it's my job to make that final call.
Yeah, great question. And by the way, you're also modeling it brilliantly. The answer, because there's a couple of things. I think there's a skill that I'll mention called acknowledging and validating. And that comes up a lot in my work as a coach and a counselor, where acknowledging is kind of echoing back what you've heard the person say. And validating is validating whatever the emotion is that they're experiencing. So I might say something like, I hear, Atisha, that you've got a lot of concerns about the new performance management process. And that makes perfect sense, considering that like this is a big change and there's probably a lot of confusion. And I can understand, that you might have some hesitation. However, this is the tool that we're going to be using moving forward. And it's important that you understand how this is going to be applied, blah, 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 blah. But I think going back to your point, I think, I can't remember if it was Christina that was asking that question, but, I think what can be helpful in all of these situations is when we acknowledge and validate where the other person's coming from, but that doesn't mean we have to agree. And we can still have our perspective, and we can still make the call that it's going to be this way. And here's the rationale why. So great question. Great question. And I think I find that in situations, particularly when they're more heated, the more we can acknowledge and validate where the person's coming from, it's almost like it lets the steam out or the air out of the balloon. But then we're still going to communicate what needs to happen. But it's being able to use those skills in the moment. And hopefully that was helpful. And that's a great question. So I want to share another tool with y'all. And I was noticing some things coming in the chat that, how do you set something up for success? Because isn't it all about how the other person reacts? And yes and no, because you can't control how another person's going to react, based on a bit of straight talk that you might be offering up. But at the same time, there's ways of framing things from a communication standpoint that can enable that message to be much more effective rather than less effective. And so I wanted to share also a model for giving feedback, because straight talk often shows up in the context where somebody needs a bit of feedback. And in my experience, like this is one aspect where it's often not done very well. And I'll share more what I mean by that. But I use this model in terms of thinking about like how to give feedback or how to say something directly that needs to be said. And so the first aspect is to set the stage. So when you think about what that might mean, it's about not like catching them like in the hallway in between meetings and saying, hey, I need to tell you something. Or it's not about coming up to someone in the lunchroom and laying something on them like in a public place. where you're not going to have the ability to really connect. But yeah, Jorge, to your point in chat, there's a time and a place. So the first point is to think about like, what is the appropriate time and place? So the S is set the stage. Then the E gets into the piece that I've kind of been emphasizing with the 3 elements of straight talk. So I'm going to clearly share what I'm noticing in terms of the behavior. I'm going to share the impact that's having, and I'm going to share the consequence of that. So, but I'm going to share what I observed rather than making opinions about it. So for instance, this is where we often like get this wrong with language, and then we find ourselves in the middle of something pretty contentious. So I could say to Jorge, hey, Jorge, in that meeting the other day, you were really aggressive, and you really hurt Brett's feelings, and you should go apologize to her. Or I could say, hey, Jorge, like in that meeting, here's what I observed. Like I observed that every time Brett tried to speak, you spoke over her. And I then noticed that, like, as a result of that, the impact of that was, I think she started shutting down in that meeting. And the consequence that I'm worried about is that I'm a little worried that Brett's not gonna speak up in the future. And that could also impact your relationship with Brett. And I know that you really care about Brett. So I'm bringing in the compassion piece too. And I know that you really care about your interactions with the team. And so I wanted to point this out. What do you think? Now I'm speaking to the E, which is exploring the other person's point of view. So I open up the conversation at that point. And then we talk about, next steps and outcomes. So what do you think you might need to do differently next time around? So I think, it's important to sometimes have like a tool or a structure that you might use in some of these situations or conversations. But I think what's important about explaining your view is that it's factual. I'm not bringing in a lot of like adjective opinion words like aggressive or you were mean, or you're being very difficult. It's about what you've directly observed, the impact that you're seeing that have, and the consequence. And ultimately, you're owning your interpretation. So the language that you might use is, hey, this is what I noticed, and here's the impact I think this could potentially have, and here's the consequence this could have on Brett in the future, and the team dynamics. So I shared that, and let me just get like your reaction or questions to this model that I'm sharing right now, or what stands out for you. I'm happy to hear from a few folks because we've got a little bit of time.
Shelley, one question that came through the chat was, would cultural background and geographical location impact this?
Yeah, totally. I think so. So I mean, we're all operating in a context. And, when you think about like, that could be, working with people from different cultures, or it could be that, I'm coming from an organization that values certain things, and that other people aren't, so absolutely, and you probably want to think through that, like what's some of the context at play here. Any other thoughts or questions on that? Anybody want to share? Oh, I see Ruben's hand is up. Ruben, go for it.
So one thing I would caution, or I would think would be important, is for the person who's following this model is to not have a preconceived notion of what D is going to be.
Exactly.
And make sure that you take in the second E of the other person and implement both your view and their point of view.
Brilliant.
Both get the buy-in for whatever presented in D.
Absolutely. I think that's such a brilliant point, Ruben. And I appreciate you bringing that out, because sometimes too, like when we give feedback, we have an expectation of what they should do. But if you think about it, like if I'm asking some coaching questions like, well, what do you think, the action should be, or how would you like to show up differently in the future? You're going to get a lot more buy-in to the extent that they're actually answering that question and coming up with what they want the action to be, as opposed to you telling them what it should be. So I think that's a brilliant point. And I see Brenda's hand up and I see Kenneth's hand up, and then I'm going to move on because we're going to have to close. So I'll take a couple more. Brenda, I think you're up.
Yes, well, actually, this was just a comment. I wish I had like a card with me and just remind myself every time I'm having a conversation like behavior, impact, and consequence. I think it's a great model. Thank you for sharing. And I wonder if there is like tools or something where we can study more about how to have these conversations, but more in like, even like have examples of how to start these conversations.
Love it. And that's a great opportunity to kind of plug a lot of the courses that the Center for Professional Education offers. So I know that there's one on difficult conversations or dealing with difficult people. And I think there was some chatter and chat going on about that. So you may sign up for that. I teach a number of courses too, and I often bring communication skills into it, but feel free to take a screenshot of this slide as well, because and you kind of use that like as a tool. And let's see, Kenneth, I see your hand up, and then we're going to move on.
Yes, hello again. Sam, something occurred to me as I was listening to this and considering how I act myself, is that I know we've all taken some sort of personality inventories or tests throughout the years. And I know one of the things, for example, I'm very good at soliciting ideas and opinions from others, because one of the personality traits I have is that I'm a data collector. I can never get enough data. That's also a detriment in that someone has to make a decision. And sometimes that's a problem, either soliciting from the group or making the decision as the manager of a project. And
Right.
That's what I need help often with, is how do I solicit that from the group correctly?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and there's not like a short answer to that. One of the you could look up something called social styles or influencing styles, but quite often we and I'm trying to think whether or not I include this in one of the courses I teach. I don't think I do, but it's about assessing, okay, you're kind of the analyst type and you need a lot of information, but who's my audience and who am I actually speaking to? Because that's really going to change, because they might be more of what I would call a driver, which is the person which is like, be brief, be bright, be gone. Or, they might fall into one of the different categories. And so I think is a short way of answering your question without having the luxury of like an hour or so to chat about it. Like, I think it's really asking yourself, like, what is the personality of the audience, and how do I need to tailor my message to make it most effective? And hopefully that's somewhat helpful. And I'm also gonna I just want to hit a few points to close out as well. Here's a few final tips as it comes to straight talk. This is for the benefit of everybody. Start by asking for criticism, not necessarily by giving it. And so, and this helps because I want to demonstrate that I can dish it out before I show I can take it. And that's like, I want to demonstrate I can take it before I dish it out. That's really what it comes down to. So one of the ways that I ask, and this can often take the pressure off another person, is what's the one thing I could do differently that would really move the needle in terms of my performance? And that's kind of a soft way of asking for feedback, such that it doesn't feel so much like a feedback conversation. Balance the praise and criticism. And so it's not necessarily, there's a lot of talk about the sandwich, that I've got to say something good, then I say the bad thing, and then I say the good thing again to dress it up. it's not so much about the sandwich. It's more about like thinking about what's my intention behind this conversation. And if your intention is just to share the criticism, then just share the criticism. Quite often the sandwich gets misused. And what ends up happening is I'm going to try to say something positive to butter them up, and then I'm going to hit them with the negative that they really need to hear. And then I'm going to say something as well to, like, butter them up again. And really, that shouldn't be the intention. So be looking for opportunities where you can praise as well as the things you need to criticize, and think about the balance. And then finally, lastly, understand that perilous border between obnoxious aggression and compassionate candor. Again, we're not wanting to fall into the trap of Steve Jobs here. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and close out. And if you're interested on signing up for any of CPE's fabulous courses, you can contact Atisha here, and these are her contact details and her phone number, and she'd be happy to sign you up. And I really, really, really enjoyed that. Oh, and Carrie, to your question, what's the one thing that I could improve on that would really move the needle in terms of my performance? Perfect. All right. So Atisha, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so thank you again, Shelley, for all of this great information. You can tell by the activity in the chat that it was very much appreciated. Thank you all, everyone, for dedicating your lunch hour to listening and to attending this webinar. As Shelley mentioned, my contact information is there. Please email me if you have any questions. If you're interested in any of the courses that we offer, I can personally say that they're great on both ends because I've taken them, and also because I get to help students get enrolled in them. We have a link that I'll be sending out within the coming days. And so we just thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. Bye.